Hey everyone, welcome to Rebloom, the podcast where we explore the power of change, rediscovery, and living with intention.
That's right. We're your hosts, Lori and Jamie, two friends who really love a good story about transformation.
In each podcast, we're going to chat with inspiring guests who've made bold pivots in their lives or careers. They've let go of what no longer served them to embrace something more authentic, joyful, and true to who they really are.
And the best part, many of them reconnect with passions or dreams they discovered as kids. It's about finding the seeds planted long ago and letting them bloom again.
So if you're ready for real conversations about reinvention, purpose, and following your creative heart, you're in the right place.
Let's dive in and see what it takes to rebloom.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Rebloom. I am crazy excited about this episode. Hi, Lori.
Hey, Jamie. We're both fangirling a little bit today over our guest. I know this person. I've followed her as you have for a long time. But you get the honors of introducing her.
Oh, I do. And I have to tell you, my heart is just so full that we are so proud to welcome Rae Roberts today. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We're honored to be able to talk to you today.
We are so thrilled. So for any of our listeners who don't know Rae, and I don't know how you don't, because she's pretty amazing and she has had an incredible career. But I just want to give you a little background. She started as a social worker and took a pivot in her 30s and actually discovered her joy was doing artwork and began to build her art career. And at the same time, also started having a family and had a son and started to license her work and was an author of a book, and then started to be an instructor and work with businesses. And her career just took off in the most beautiful ways. And we cannot wait to hear all about her journey. Welcome, Kelly.
Oh my gosh, that was so sweet. Thank you. It seems I've been doing this for so long now. It's really touching to kind of remember how it all got started. I think it's
we bring a lot of our guests down memory lane because you do most of us are in forward mode all the time, and once in a while it's kind of nice to just look back and just kind of reminisce on where it all started. So for you, you might have had other pivots even before moving from social work into the art world, but we want to hear all of it. So really? I guess take us back.
Yes.
Back. I did have some pivots, and I think when I trace it back, I think for me, it was sort of building a trust process and a confidence practice. And so that when I did pivot in my early 30s, I was ready. And I had some moments that had happened in my life prior to that were readying me. I didn't know it, at the time, but these decisions prepared me, forged me. And one of those big decisions was when I was in my early 20s, I did a big road trip with a girlfriend of mine. We were in graduate school for social work, and one of our other friends had moved to Seattle, Washington, and we were in Florida. I grew up in Florida, in the Panhandle. So we road tripped, and I had never been anywhere ever, truly, except to and from New Jersey to see family. And so doing that road trip and deciding I want to move out west, and then moving out west a year later was one of those decisions. It was a huge pivot in my life.
That's a huge pivot.
Wow.
Huge pivot. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know this part of your story.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I didn't realize you were from Florida. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm from the South.
Wow.
Yes, born and raised and grew up in rural Florida and then in Jacksonville, Florida for high school. I moved a lot. I went to a different school every year from
Wow.
kindergarten until I was 14, until eighth grade. So, it's when we look back on these sort of threads in our life, they ready us for these moments when, oh, I think I want to make a change. And
Yeah.
boy,
What intrigued you about Seattle or the West Coast?
well, I had never been again, I had never seen the West Coast. I'd never seen big mountains. It was August, so it was beautiful, and Rainier was amazing. And we had a friend that worked for the Oregonian. And so we went through Portland, and the roses were out. And I was just like, you know what? I think I need to live here. This feels more like me. It was
Yeah.
creative. I was creative. I didn't identify as an artist, but I definitely knew that these were my people. And so
Hmm.
I just set a decision. I was like, I'm going to give myself a year to gather up the money. And this was before the internet. So I would go to Barnes and Noble and go to the travel section and get the books about Portland, Oregon, and figure out, the different parts of town and look at the classifieds and find an apartment and find a job, and
Wow.
Wow.
off I went. And
Wow.
Wow.
And
it
were
was an
you
exciting
supported in
time.
that decision? Were you supported by your family?
Well, I don't remember not being supportive. I think my mom was, like, please don't go forever. And of course, all these years later, I'm still here. And she eventually moved out here as well with my dad, Greg, when my son was born.
I love
But
that.
it was an exciting time. I think I was 24, 25, and about 12 weeks before I was set to go and drive alone to Portland, where I decided I was going to go live. I met John, who is my now husband, but at the time we met 12 weeks before I was set to go.
No.
And we just fell madly in love. And he came with me, sight unseen,
Wow.
here to the West
Wow.
Coast. Yeah, it was so very exciting time. But I think that built a lot of confidence and a lot of this sense of sort of independence that I could figure it out and everything would be okay. And a couple years later, maybe 5 years later, actually, I was 28 or 29 and was really unhappy in my social work job and was a little anxious, having a little like melancholy vibes for a long time. And so we made another big decision and we decided to sell our house and sell our belongings and sell our cars. And we decided to go and just travel for a year around the United States and see if we could find a city that we loved as much as we loved Portland, but maybe wasn't so rainy. Um,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
and that was another one of those decisions that I think sort of prepped me for the pivot. And that was a big adventure. We sold our house. We had $30,000 from the sale. We paid off my student loans, which left us, I think, with like, I don't know, $18,000. And we made that last for a year. We went and
Wow.
camped
Wow.
all around the United States and California and in search of our new home. And we stayed in hotels every Sunday night to watch Alias. That was when Alias was on TV.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, the funny thing about that is we ended up circling back to Portland after that year away because we did not find the place. But
Were
yeah,
you drawn to, was there any other place that you were kind of drawn to, or you kind of, or when did you realize you really wanted to be back where you started?
when we wound back up in Florida for about 12 weeks, and we both had family there at the time, and it was just, I think, the contrast of being back in Florida and being like, "Yep, nope, we're not this. We missed it. We had a
Yeah.
longing for Oregon, and so we came back and settled in for a couple more years before making another pivot. Like,
Uh,
well, my husband and I joke that our lives are just one big change after the next every 5 to 8 years.
It's
well,
funny because as an outsider watching your career, it feels that way. Like
Yeah,
I see like when you're like on the precipice of something new, and then what I admire about you is you do it. You make it
yeah.
happen.
yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, I
And I want
actually
to,
started.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go.
I was going to say the other thing that I noticed too is that so I've been following Kelly Rae's story for many years. I found her in through a magazine, Cloth Paper Scissors, many years ago. But then she had a blog. You had a blog, and you're one of the first people to sort of put your story out there. And there was an authenticity about what you shared. And, or maybe you were sharing it on Facebook, or I can't remember because it was many, many years ago. But I loved, I know it was pre Instagram, and but
Yeah.
it was really you sharing your journey. And did you have a pivot point that you made that you thought, hey, I'm going to share this story of where we're going and what we're doing?
Yeah, there was a pivot point. I remember it really clearly. I was a social worker in Portland, and my husband was a nurse, a trauma nurse, and we didn't have any children. It was 2005. And this was before Instagram. It was before, I think it was during the Friendster days. Remember Friendster before
Oh gosh,
MySpace?
I don't even remember
Yeah.
Yeah,
that.
But one
We're
of
dating ourselves now.
yeah.
we are dating ourselves. But I was not quite 30 or about to be. And I had a friend who was living in Austin, and she worked at Book People. And she went to colleges and got a degree in creative writing. And then she decided, you know what? I think I want to be a filmmaker. And so she started a blog, and it was just on Blogspot, and she would share her adventures of how she decided to become a filmmaker. And um and she we all of my friends, this was, we were all in different parts of the country, and so she created this blog so we could all kind of follow along in her adventures. Her name is Kat Candler. She's still a filmmaker. She's a showrunner for Oprah and Ava
Oh,
DuVernay.
that's so cool.
And anyway, watching her early sort of like I have no idea how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. And I watched her over a year create friends and rent cameras and create a feature length film that ended up going
Wow.
to
Wow.
Sundance. And it was about our little friend group in junior high and high school. And that that inspired me to start a blog because I also wanted to keep up with my family and friends. And then about a year and a half of doing that, I was so inspired by Kat's story that I too started to just sort of share little pieces and what I was learning. And her blog, like that little rabbit hole that we all do, I eventually found myself reading blogs of other mixed media artists like Misty Mon and DJ Pettit and
Hmm.
Judy Wise. And I learned about Art Fest, and this whole world opened up for so many of us in those days. And I was so obsessed and intrigued and started learning and just started writing about what I was learning and how I was feeling about it. But a lot of that was inspired by my filmmaker friend, Kat Candler.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
I
Yeah.
love that. And, one of the things that I remember early on is you sharing little bits of your story personally, but you would also share what you were learning artistically. And that was a lesson for me because they were simple little things, mixing colors or doing things. And I thought, wow, she's sharing her secret sauce. She's sharing and you were in a way, but you were sharing parts of it. And I thought that is really brave to do. And I'll fast forward several years later, I had the opportunity to be published and they wanted to know how I did something. And I'd spent a year doing it. And I thought, oh no, I can't share this. And then I thought back to you and I thought, well, Kelly Rae shared what she did and her career has grown and it's beautiful. And I thought,
Mhm.
no, I'm going to do this. And I did. I shared it. And I'm sure nobody copied what I was doing, but I got published about 10 more times and my whole art career was
Mm,
so much greater and all the connections because I just shared. It was no big deal. And I took that lesson from you very
mm,
early on, just from you sharing a little piece of your heart, but also a little piece of what you knew with other people. And it really helped other people to grow. So I thank you for that.
mm.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
I was
think
just
that's
going to
important.
say, I feel like the work that you were doing had so much heart and messaging
Yes.
that it was there at the right time for a lot of,
Mm.
especially women. And we have a common friend, Anne Brown, who I know
Yes.
she was very instrumental at Demdeco
Huge. Yeah,
and fought for you
she
too,
did.
because they always, every company, they have to weigh like who's the audience, what is it going to sell, whatever. But she really went to bat for you
She really
and
did.
believed in how strong your messaging
Mm.
was now
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
um, so can you talk a little bit about how you went from just blogging about art and dipping your toe into it to then, all the other
Yes.
things that bloomed out of that?
Yeah, it was such a surprise. And you know how we have those like seasons in our lives that are just, and it's never happened since ever. And I keep wondering, is it that ever going to happen again? But it was a really magical season. And I knew that I was in something mystical because it seemed like every other week there was something I was celebrating with John, and he was in grad school. We happened to be in California at the time. But there was this pivotal moment again when he decided to go to graduate school, and I was a full time social worker. And the school was in California. It was a 2 year program, and it was essentially like residency. So he would not be able to work during the program. We took out student loans, but I was going to have to work full time in Oakland, California, as an ER social worker. And I had this just moment of like, ooh, like seize this opportunity because um, I was fired up. Etsy had just opened its door. I started my blog in
Yeah.
2005. It's now 2006. Etsy is opened. And I thought, I'm going to work this social work job while my husband's in grad school. And I was young. I didn't have children. I wasn't a mom. And I just had a lot of energy, a lot of alone time while he was off doing his thing. I started that little Etsy shop and just worked endlessly on it, but with a lot of joy, and was blogging throughout this whole process. And there was an editor at Northlight Books who was sort of taking note and reading my blog and said, you know what, your story of coming into the creative life could be a really great book. And what do you think about doing that? And I was like, what? And so off I went doing that. And then I needed and wanted to get my name out there. And so my friend Mady Rose, who was in San Francisco in the mission,
Love
would come
her.
over
I
and we'd
love
have
her.
these
She's
little,
amazing.
she's amazing. She's my
She's
very,
amazing.
very best friend. But we would have these little parties at my house where we would sit on our laptops and email editors of various blogs, big blogs and magazines to see if we could get some traction. And during one of those visits, I made this beautiful box and I painted the box. This is something, Laura, I think I can see you doing too. But I just put in a bunch of my art and hand wrote this beautiful letter and framed it, painted the whole outside of the box and sent it off to Cloth Paper Scissors and to Somerset magazines. And I said, again, I have no idea what I was thinking, but I think when you're so naive, you don't even know
Right.
what, it's what you're doing. And so that worked for me. And they called back and said, hey, we would love to have you do a series of articles for us for a year. So that, Jamie, is probably what you
What I
read. And
saw.
then,
Yeah.
it just kept going. And then eventually Anne Brown from Dimdeco was checking out Etsy and she saw my art. And so it was just this little perfect storm. And she did go to bat for me at Dimdeco and said, I really want, they had never done wall art before as a category. And she did.
Right.
And I had no idea how any of that worked. And in fact, I was just minding my own business. I was visiting a friend in New York and I got this phone call from Anne Brown in January saying, I'm at a trade show and your work is selling really well. And I'm like, what's a trade show? And what do you mean my work is in a showroom? I really had no idea what she was talking about. Got off the phone and I said to my friend, this woman, Anne Brown, who I hadn't been in touch with because it had been like a year when I'd sent her my art files, and I didn't know that I was supposed to stay in touch or do any of that. And then, it was just this void. And then she's like, and so we want to do a summer release and we want to move now. And we want to do this and we want to do that. I'm like, okay. So that's how all that started.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
It really is it was a fun, fast, exciting time. And then it went from there. That's what started licensing. And that's how I met you, Lori.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those trade shows.
We've
Yeah.
actually had dinner with the Dimdeco people. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I met you when I was, like in the thick of what have I gotten myself into and learning about the industry and yeah.
Yeah. It can be pretty crazy. Rewarding, but pretty crazy.
What I
And
also
you're still going
love.
so strong on it, Lori. I love that you're
What's that?
She
you're still
is.
going strong all these years with licensing. I love that you're doing.
I've kind of like backed off a little bit and just kind of work with certain companies, and now I'm kind of bolstering up my daughter because, I'm handing it over to the next gen. Steve likes to say teasingly, he's like, you're the has-been. She's the it girl.
No.
I love watching those adventures. It just looks really fun.
Yeah.
But you all, including Kenzie, all three of you have just such a beautiful look and such a beautiful style that's uniquely your own. And I think, Kelly, that's what really stood out. As Lori said, we needed it at the time. I think we really need it again right now.
Yeah.
We need hope and joy and softness and kindness. And did you draw some of your social work, the things from your social work, and bring that into your artwork? Did that help to inspire what you were doing?
Yeah,
And
100%. I still think that what I do is a marriage of my social work sensibility, my social work career. I still think I'm a social worker. I'm just doing it differently. I'm doing it with art, but yeah, I think it's always been that way and it will always be that way for me. I think of it as like an encouragement brand or like and the messages are messages I need to hear. So I'm pretty sure someone else needs to hear them. Yeah.
I was teaching with Carrie Schmidt. You know Carrie.
Yeah.
And some of the women at that retreat had been at one or two of your retreats, and they
Mm,
really were singing your praises in terms of that it's your retreats are not just about art making, but they're also about so much more, and the
yeah,
depth and like feeling safe and you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
encouragement and all of those things. So, yeah, I think
yeah,
explaining it that way, that it's a marriage. And often in our conversations with people, as they kind of go back through their journey, it's always interesting to me to see how people pick up the little seeds along the way and they just
Yeah.
keep applying it to the next thing, to
yeah,
the next thing, to the next thing. And it's just fun to hear those stories. I love that.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's for all of us. There's that sort of like woven thread that goes, and even um, even I've always been a builder. I love building and creating worlds and ideas and things, and then I love breaking it all down again and then building something new and deconstructing. Like I notice, especially as I get older, oh, that's just, there's nothing wrong with that. I used to think that there was something wrong with that. Like just settle in, do one thing. But it's just not my nature. And if I follow those threads all the way back, even when I was a kid and a teen, I was doing the same things. And so I
Mm.
love I love, I'm I'm going to be 50 soon. And I just, oh, you guys, I just love it so much. There's the
Yep.
liberation and the freedom.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. There is. And I think if people follow your work or look towards your work, they'll see the layers of life that you bring to each and every piece that you do. And I think that's what made me love your work so much initially and follow along with your career is, to your point, you bring the threads through, you bring the layers through. Each and every piece is a collage of
Hmm.
so much of your life, and it's just beautiful, and
Hmm.
it's so
Thank you.
fun. And gosh, we do need it, and yeah, Lori,
So you're doing the licensing thing for a
yeah,
while, but then I saw you moving into your own retail space. And
yeah.
Right.
then like take
But
us through
that was
the
around the
journey.
pandemic time, wasn't it?
I have an uncanny habit of making these pivots or these big decisions, and then, wild things happen. Like, we moved here. We moved to Sisters, Oregon about 6 years ago. And that was a big pivot as well. And that was in 2018 or 2019. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? I was teaching a lot and I was licensing a lot and I was overwhelmed and burnt out. And I thought, I'm just going to go live a simple life in this little mountain town with 3,000 other people where it's sunnier and yes. And then within a year, I'm like, let's have a retail store and, fill up my life with more creative chaos. And then we signed our lease on March 1st of 2020. And then the pandemic
Ugh.
a couple of weeks later.
Ugh.
And that was a whole era. Yeah, that was a fun era. And then the pandemic hit, and I'm sure Lori, with you too, it really, really, really affected my licensing career.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah.
And
Big
that
time.
was when a huge shift for me in my licensing journey. And also through the pandemic, I started to learn about print on demand and manufacturing my own stickers. And so that's been really fun too, to sort of play with being able to do it ourselves. And this year I started my own wholesale business, which, holy smokes, I'm not, again, like just totally blown up my life. Um, and I'm leaning a lot on our mutual friend, Michelle Allen, of like, again, what have I
Yeah.
gotten myself into? But I was telling some friends the other day, I was like, I do love waking up every morning and going to work. I love what I
Mhm.
do. I love all the different eras. I love change. Um, I do a lot of work on my personal work to not uh, do too much um, and sort of settle in, let my nervous system but settle. But I do love building things.
Let's take a quick minute and thank our amazing sponsors. Our podcast is proudly brought to you today by Jet Creative and Urban Stems. Jet Creative is a women-owned marketing firm committed to community and empowerment since 2013. Are you ready to rebloom and build a website or start a podcast? Visit jetcreative.com/podcast to kickstart your journey. They will help you bloom in ways you never imagined. And bonus, our listeners get an exclusive discount when you mention Rebloom. And a huge thanks to Urban Stems, your go-to and our go-to source for fresh, gorgeous bouquets and gifts delivered coast to coast. Use Bloom Big 20 and save 20% on your next order. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rebloom Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to you for joining us today.
So, when you're deciding to take a major plunge or make a change, do you does anxiety accompany that? Because we were
Yeah,
talking before we hit record that a lot of people are very change averse, and because it's not easy, change is
yeah,
hard. And
Mm.
sometimes people maybe are unhappy in what they're doing, but they don't want to make that leap because they're afraid. So how do you approach the changes and get yourself revved up to be able to do it? And
mm,
you probably also have great support from John and True, and I'm
yeah,
guessing. So I
yeah,
know
yeah,
that that's
yeah,
always very important when people have those kinds of people in their lives to help spur them on.
yeah. Well, I mean, you guys know this. Like, I think for me, what happens is I start to get these rumblings of dissatisfaction or
Mm.
something isn't feeling quite right. And then what happens is I start to envision how can I create the experience or the life or these little small changes. A lot of it are just small changes that can sort of bring more intention into how I want to live my life. So I those so it you so for these and again I think those little small pivots ready us for the bigger pivots. And if we're um, making these micro adjustments in our lives on other things, like little tiny things, like who we choose to spend our time with, how we're decorating our homes, how we choose to adorn our bodies in the morning with our clothes. Like, are we in full representation of who we are in the world? Does it show
Yeah.
in, do you know what I mean? Like in our community, in our homes, in our clothing, in our artwork. And so then when we start to get these rumblings that something's not quite right, and we want to create something new, the anxiety is there for sure. But for me, my thought process is: do I want to? Nothing changes if nothing changes, kind of
Right.
idea. Yeah, yeah,
So, to build on that, years ago, like I went through a time in my 30s where I was like, well, pretty depressed and worked with a life coach. And one of the exercises was break down your life into, what do you wear? What does your home look like? What is your faith life like? What's your family life? All of the pillars that make you who you
Mm-hmm.
are, and then write down where you are now, and then write down a vision for where you would want it to be.
vision. Yeah.
And it was such a great exercise to go through.
I do that all the time too, and I couldn't agree with both of you. I always think of like the F's, your faith, your foundation, your friends, whatever they may be, whatever those, as you said, Lori, those pillars. I
Yeah.
find that when something's out of balance in one of those particularly,
Right.
that's when I'm out of balance, and that's when
Mhm.
you really need to kind of dial in and either feed that issue or whatever's going on, but also, everything moves forward. All of those pillars move forward and nothing is sedentary. So as we have families, our family needs change. Our
Mhm.
If you're helping with your parents, that changes. If your children are
Mhm.
growing, and I mean,
Mhm.
everything is shifting and moving in a beautiful way. But
Mhm.
it often requires us to dial back on some things and move forward on some things. And I
Yeah.
think that's the hard. It's interesting because I don't know, personally, I've listened to sort of what you said, Kelly. You listen to those grumblings, you listen to what is bothering you, but you also make those fine changes, and then it helps you to grow in all of the areas, all of them.
Right. And it prepares you when you need to make a big decision about who you're spending your life with, what job
Yeah.
career you have. Are you happy in this job? But if we aren't doing it in those little micro areas and editing out and making sure we're showing up for ourselves, and then it's harder to make a big change. For me now, a big change is so much easier in some ways, and in some ways it's a lot harder because there's a lot more to lose. Um, but I think it's hard either way. So
Yeah.
what's the right hard that's going to put me in more alignment with my whispers that are saying, more joy or more creativity or more, I'm always thinking about this with parenting with my 14-year-old, like more, like get sneaking in as much connection as I can in these
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And just micro adjusting all of that all the time as we do as women, I think. This
Yes.
is what fills our hearts and our minds. But when it comes to those dreams that we have for ourselves, like
Mm.
like what you're doing with this podcast,
Yeah.
of like, okay, I'm gonna create the experiences that I most crave for my life. And for you, that was reaching out to Lori and saying, I want to do this. Let's do it. It's these little nothing, not everything needs to be a grand, big gesture change. It's just these little quiet, subtle um, movements that we make
I think
that,
it's listening. It's listening to your heart, and it lets you know what to say yes to, and it also lets you know what to say no to. And then it lets
yeah,
you really focus. And I think
right.
as we grow and we move, sometimes we don't listen to that voice. And I think our voice within our heart really does know best. It does. And we know what we need.
I was just listening to the Smartless podcast and they were interviewing Gillian Anderson. And I loved the conversation because they were talking about like she expressed how she'll say yes to something when
Mm.
she's actually very terrified. And she'll say yes and then deal with the fear afterwards.
Yeah.
And when she's in the muck of it, thinking, "What the hell did I? Why? What did I do?"
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then getting through it, and then Jason Bateman said, "Yeah." And then on the other end, that's when the confidence kicks in because
Right.
you
Yeah.
Right.
said yes, you faced the fear, you made your way through it, and now you're more confident and you're ready for the next yes. And
Yes.
it might be a bigger yes next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're ready. Yes, that's exactly it. I think that we say yes, or maybe we say even sometimes our full body yeses, or sometimes even the full body knows are a confidence builder, of
Mhm.
like
Yes.
that sometimes is the scarier choice.
I
But yeah, if we're scared and terrified and excited all at the same time, then that's pretty part. I know that I'm in a good moment or making a good choice. And then yeah.
I would say that's exactly the way Lori and I felt about this podcast. We
Oh,
said,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I
That
was the
describes our podcast
Yes.
experience.
I say I
You're
was the reluctant podcaster, but my friend Jamie had a brilliant idea. I think
We
these
can do it.
conversations are really powerful, and she said,
oh
"We're
so
doing a podcast," and I'm like, "What?"
Yeah,
but
but
here we are talking to you and having other great conversations, and
yeah.
hopefully
And
they're
we feel
helpful to people.
confident. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we feel confident to your point.
yeah,
Like we feel
yeah.
so good because we know that these stories are important to share. And I
Mm,
think people look at someone like yourself, Kelly Rae, like
mhm.
Lori, who have beautiful big careers, and they think, oh, well, they've been famous, and no, 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 no. It's it started it started with the simple, with the love and the joy of drawing or painting,
Yeah,
and grew from there. And
yeah.
it also involved a lot
Wow.
of hard work along the way. And so
And a
you,
super big dose of curiosity. That's what I
yes,
always tell people, that's my superpower, and I hope I never lose it. And I'm guessing it's the same for both of you. But
It's
I don't
so
know. I'm led. I think Elizabeth Gilbert or someone just said, lead with curiosity, not fear.
right.
And
yeah,
I love that. And I sort of always dive into something when I'm really curious. And the fear
Oh,
is like secondary. It's like you're just driven to learn about something because you have
I
to.
I love that. You know what else? Curiosity has been um, such a companion for me with is my self talk. If my self
Hmm.
talk about anything, if I the moment I turn to curiosity and compassion, tell me more about that. Where do you think that's coming?
Hmm.
yeah,
Why do you think you're talking to yourself that way? Is there another way? Like it's been
Hmm.
such a softener for me on
yeah.
Hmm.
the canvas too. More fun on the creative side, but more softening on the inside.
I love that.
Interesting.
I
I
love
do
Yeah.
love
that.
that. I love that. So you were licensing for many years and
Yeah.
are still licensing. And are you still licensing, or
You
are you
know
doing
what?
more wholesale? Yeah.
Yeah, Demdeco and I sunsetted our partnership a couple of years ago. And that was a big celebration for me. I'm a big celebration person when I went on for endings. Um, and right now, the only licensing that I do is fabric and greeting cards. And that's great for me. And then I have my own independent line of doing my own cards, but I also license with Lean and Tree, who I love, 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 love them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then fabric, but everything else I'm manufacturing myself now.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And
And
how do you like that world? How do you like manufacturing by yourself?
Oh gosh. This I just started. It hasn't even been a year that I was like, let's do this. And this is the riskiest decision I've ever made, the riskiest pivot, the scariest pivot, both financially and otherwise, because I'm just like, sure hope this works. And hired, I used to, it used to just be me. And like every now and again, and through various eras, I would have like one other person helping me with my inbox or something. But now I have a marketing person and an operations person and a shipping person and a product development it's payroll. So
Yeah,
I'm freaking out a little bit if I'm being absolutely honest. But it's that scary freak out and that exciting freak out of like, okay, let's see if we can reach more people and have more creative control and have um, fun. And I'm learning about how to be a boss right now and
Oh,
team.
that's a big one. Oh,
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it's just such a huge learning curve in so many ways. And
oh,
I, not even just in creatively in business, but also I definitely believe that the choices we make are sort of like, when we choose our partners or our friends, there is this
Yeah.
sort of cosmic reason we're drawn to that person to work out our stuff with and evolve and develop personally. And I think that's true in business. Like there was something cosmic in my decision to do this. And there's a lot of stuff I'm working out and learning and healing. And one of those things is I've always done things alone. And this is the first year I've
Ah,
really had a team. And
interesting.
that has been huge for me to sort of let go the reins, accept help, have support, ask for what I need and what I want on this larger playground of which to learn all this stuff. So it's it's so good and it's very rich with learnings and um, nothing in my mind or what I'm telling myself right now is nothing fails, even if this isn't a like commercial success. It still has been a wild success in so many other ways for me already.
Yeah.
I so agree with that sentiment that nothing is a failure because
Agree.
sometimes you emerge on the other side of said failure or whatever or learning a
Yeah.
much better person, a much stronger person, a much more centered person. So I think it's so cool watching you unbox your products as they come in
Yes.
from, I'm sure they're coming from China or, far,
They're
far
coming from
away.
India right now, and
Yeah.
then we just got these new. I'm announcing these on Thursday, but we're working with a Seattle printer, so all of our cards are gold foil now. So
Ooh,
that kind of stuff, I'm just like,
that's got
yes,
to be like Christmas.
It
feels
is.
good.
Yes.
You know that feeling of like,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
it's fun.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Well,
It's
and we've talked to others who are kind of moving and shifting from, working with other companies to pulling their business within. And you get that lovely control. But the other thing that you've done, that Lori's done, and some others that we've spoken to too, is you've built your brand. You've really spent many, many years cultivating your beautiful brand.
yeah.
And I have to believe, as a fangirl, as one of your many, that it will be a huge success because it
Oh,
is. It's you're spreading joy and in beauty and in your creativity and but it's important, as you said, as you take these pivots that you recognize as a business professional too, how to succeed. I mean, if you've got to grow and change it, and I do think sometimes people don't look at the business side of art, and there's a big side to that that you have to really
oh
be smart
gosh.
about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've worked with many young artists, and they're very sweet, and they're very. I've talked to them, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go make art." I'm like, "Okay, well, how are you going to pay your rent?" Like you have to think as a marketing person, as a business person, and I think Kelly Rae, you've always done that. You've really thought that way from the very
Hmm.
beginning.
Thank you. I don't,
Yeah.
people say that, but I don't know how there, and I think this is true for a lot of us artists brands that we're just out there doing our thing and we're not thinking in the moment, I'm building a brand. Where
Yeah.
Right.
nowadays it seems to be that way. Like, I'm going to go build a brand. Whereas
Yeah.
when I was coming up, it was like, oh, I'm just going to go make some art. But nowadays, there's the technology is such that you can just go get a website up in a day. Whereas
Yes.
back in the olden days, you had a blog spot, and we didn't have the tools that we have now. So I think by the time those tools came along, the brand had already been built, but we didn't even know we had a brand, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
That was my case. I mean, I started my company in 2006, but I didn't actually do any official branding until 2018. I hired someone to help me pull it all together into an official brand,
Wow.
with fonts and colors and a logo. But
Right.
up, before that, it was like, yeah, again, just kind of making the art and sort of organically sort of creating over time, a lifestyle brand, I guess, because
Yes.
we were all talking about our art, but we're also talking about what we're wearing and our studios and our families and all of all of that too.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I love
Fascinating,
it though.
right?
It is fascinating. I mean, I think we all lead with our hearts first, not
Yeah.
necessarily to your point, thinking that this big business or brand is going to happen. When I started taking floral photos, I was on a retreat with some friends that we even know, Kelly Rae, and I was in California, and they're like,
Yes,
"Oh,
I
just
remember.
post on Instagram," and I'm like, "Oh no!" But I started doing it, and I thought, well, I'm going to post what I love, which are florals and
Yeah.
antiques and handmade treasures, and then it's just grown into this neat little, I guess, brand, and it is. But I led with my heart, as all of us have done, as all three of us have done, and I think you kind of
Mhm.
lead forward, and then you think, oh, wait a minute, I think I have something here, and then your head has to come into it, and then you have to say, all right, let me be smart about this, and how can I monetize it? But I think
Yeah.
at the core of it is our heart and soul, and
Yes.
that's what you have to lead with. And
Yes. Heart-led branding. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
And a heavy dose of curiosity.
And a heavy dose of
Always.
curiosity. I
You're
love
our
it.
curiosity angel.
Are you now? You're also teaching. Are you doing any retreats coming up soon, or anything in the next year?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think when True, my 14-year-old, was before he was born, I did. I felt like I gathered and retreated with folks a lot more, and even when he was little. But then, right around that, and then it just stopped. I stopped doing very many retreats. I'd maybe do one a year or so. But then with most recently, actually in 20, again with the pandemic, I thought 2020 was going to be my year of retreats and kind of get back into it. And we had 4 retreats that were sold and were done and sold out by the time the pandemic hit. So that was
Oh
such a
man.
bummer for
Oh
all of
man.
us.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then I started doing them again, I guess just I last year, maybe one a year or so. But now I'm in a rhythm with Uptrek and I'm doing like 2 a year. So this year I did, which was so, I'm just like, yay, we're back. Like
Yeah.
traveling in earnest and being able to make plans with confidence in
Yeah.
earnest. And
It's the best.
so, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So, and I'd love to hear your story with how you're doing with your retreats, Lori, too. Because I feel
Well,
like you guys do a lot of retreats. Yeah.
I yeah.
Lori's doing a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
I do too.
I love being with kindred spirits and
Mm.
the connections you make and
Yes.
the community building, and almost
Yeah.
every retreat I teach at ends in a text chain where
Yes.
I don't know how many text chains I have now with different groups from each retreat because no one
Yes.
wants it to end. They
No
want to
one
Yeah.
keep
wants to.
connecting.
I know. And you know what the best part about that is that they come to the next retreat. So
Yeah,
now like it's like a little, middle-aged creative lady posse like
yeah,
traveling
yeah,
the world
Yes.
together. Just
exactly. Yeah.
so fun and so meaningful and I love it and what I especially love it what I love about it right now is that my kiddo is old enough that I'm bringing him with me so he can sort of see the world.
Yeah,
How
That's
same.
lucky
exciting.
are we?
Yeah,
Yes.
so Ken's just went, she's come with me a few times. And then
Yeah.
this last time I taught in Italy, my husband and my son and son in law all joined us afterwards. And it
Yeah.
was my husband's first time out of the country. So that was a big step. Big step. He has sort of travel anxiety, but we just had such a great time as a family. So it's such a gift to be able to do this. I feel so grateful.
Same,
That's
same, same,
amazing.
same. Absolutely. It's a big, and I find that going on retreats will the filling of the well, it will last for months. Like I
Oh,
will arrive
Oh,
totally.
home and I will have fuel and inspiration and motivation and all of that. It for the investment, I guess, is
Hmm.
really
yes.
worth it. It just keeps on giving for until the next one. So it's a
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would I've gone on retreats that are 10 years ago that have changed my life. And it was
yeah.
3 days. And you
Hmm.
think, how
Hmm.
did this 3 days in Palm Springs with the Shutter Sisters, which were amazing? I loved them. But you meet people that you're still friends with, that you still connect with, and to your point,
Yeah.
you take that spark with you and then it just energizes you. And I think we all need it. We all needed it certainly after 2020, but I think there's always pivot points in our life where we really, really need it. And
Oh yeah.
how
And
blessed
now more
everyone
than ever,
is
Yeah,
now more than
absolutely. No more than
now
we
more
really
ever.
than
need each
ever.
other. Yeah.
We
We
do.
need to like prioritize that
Well,
together
Kelly Rae,
as
you are an absolute joy, and we have loved having you on our podcast. We ask our podcasters, or excuse me, we ask our guests on our podcast to share a little piece of advice, maybe that's been given to you along the way, or that maybe you like to share with other people, that you think
Hmm.
would help our guests.
Oh gosh, I oh okay. I just thought of something. So about a week ago, I was in a conversation with my 14-year-old again, and we were talking about when we were doing we pulled a card, and the card was, what's the best advice you've ever been given? And he said, well, you've told me two things that I sort of live by lately. And I was like, oh, what are they? And I'll share those with you. The first one
From the
is one
14-year-old.
the first one was one that I received, which was, I have a tendency to over deliver or overdo it. And so my friends will often say, hey, Kelly Rae, like bring 50%, like bring your B game, because your B game is most people's A game. And so I see that in my own kid, and I'm like, hey, True, just please bring your B game, because it helps like
Yeah,
instantly like sort of offset that like overachiever
Oh.
person, that sort of inner drill
interesting.
sergeant. So that bring your B game. And then the other one was, I heard through Elizabeth Gilbert, who we brought up earlier, and she which I also share with my kid, and he does now too, which is the that instead of being too concerned about disappointing other people, that the opposite of the word disappoint actually means that you're not appointing yourself. And so when you disappoint someone else, it means that you're appointing yourself, your own, you're trusting what it is that you most need. And that is good.
Hmm.
So for
Hmm.
those of
Mm,
us who are people pleasers and have
Hmm.
trouble disappointing, I like that advice of like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, just please appoint yourself. It means that you're not betraying yourself. Which,
Hmm.
I
That's
love
really
that.
good.
That is
yeah,
Really
so
good.
good. Thank
Yes.
you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
I
being
feel
with
like
us
we could
today.
talk for another 3 hours
For
or
another
longer.
3
Yeah.
hours. I know. Well, thank you very much for being on our podcast. It has just been a joy to meet you via this podcast, and I cannot wait for everyone to get to know you a little bit better. And so thank you. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jamie. Thank
you,
you,
Kelly
Lori.
Rae.
It
You're
was such a treat.
Okay,
such
and
a treat.
until we meet again, everyone, peace, love, and rebloom. All right, Lori, I feel as if I've had a dream come true that I got to spend an hour talking with Kelly Rae. That was
Oh,
incredible.
that's pretty cool. And she's pretty great. And one thing that I really want to apply, something that she shared that I thought was really profound when we were talking about curiosity and how she spoke about applying curiosity to your own self talk. That
Mm,
really, really struck me.
yeah,
Like really thinking about when you are being mean to yourself, as a lot of us tend to be at
yeah.
times. Think about, why are you saying this? And could you maybe frame it a different way and in a more positive way? And I don't know, that really, really struck me. That was a really great nugget.
It was a great nugget. And it's interesting because we as creatives, and particularly Kelly Rae, put such beautiful hope and kindness and compassion into the world. And she certainly is offering that curiosity to others. And so it's a beautiful reminder to just be compassionate with ourselves and to grow creatively. And this is going to be just an incredible hour for everyone to really enjoy her journey, which has been incredible and colorful and beautiful, and just how she's gone from one job to another, but yet grown along the way. It's incredible. It's just been incredible.
Can I share one other thing that's always been an inspiration to me when it comes to Kelly Ray's? And we've talked about this, is, I watch her make changes in her life and move towards something new, and just goes all in and makes
Yeah.
it happen in such a really cool, inspiring way. So I was so happy that she could share this time with us and just talk about how, she picked up these threads throughout her life and she keeps weaving them into this really beautiful tapestry, and then keeps adding new threads to it. And just, I don't know, I just think it's so inspiring, her story.
It's amazing. And she authentically shares her beautiful story with all of us. Life is too short not to follow your passions. So go out there and let your heart plant you where you are meant to be and grow your joy.
We will be right here sharing more incredible stories of reinvention with you. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode of Rebloom.
Until next time, I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
Peace, love, and rebloom, dear friends.